Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 263. I am your host, Keith Andrew. Long here's a good friend of mine, Mark, Mr. Mark, and I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And now, for people who want to know who Mr. Mark is, Mr. Guerrero, I suck
Don't
at
worry,
last name.
It's Grimaldi. That's all right. We were just joking around before we got on air about whether or changing our stage names, and I guess I might be ripe for one. But no, it's Grimaldi, and it's actually the only reason people end up knowing it is because the royal family of Monaco has the same last name. So the only people who ever recognize it, that's the first question I get is, are you of any relation? And I said, well, if I was, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, or I'd be doing it a lot more comfortably. So no worries there, Keith.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I'm here with Mark Grimaldi. It's a real honor and privilege to have you on the show. And it's funny that your last name should start with Grim. Are you a Grim hunter?
No, I'm not actually, but I'm a little bit familiar with the whole Grimm series, but not enough to talk intelligently about it.
No, it's a great series. I would love to be a part of it. Unfortunately, you have to live in Portland.
Yeah, it looks like they do a really good job. I've seen it. It's funny, the shows that I end up watching are up. They promote it during those shows, and the CGI is amazing. With some of the work that they do, it's just, oh my god, it's incredible when they show that the character is transforming. It's just, I can't imagine how much time that must take to create that.
No, absolutely. Now, for people who want to know what the Keith Andrew Network is, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still overcome controversy and reach my goals in life. At the same time, I'm able to turn myself into a perfect example for people out there dealing with any types of disabilities or learning disabilities. But you should never give up, and you should prove to people you can still mount to something. But labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be, and you just should show them that you can still mount to something. It's a half hour, 45 minutes every time. The theme of it is uncensored, freedom of speech, freedom of self-expression. And starting off, let's jump right into it. For people who don't know who Mark, that is
Grimaldi, that's all right. You got
Mark
it,
Grimaldi.
Grimaldi.
For people who don't know who Mark Grimaldi is, you are a producer of a talk show.
Correct. So I produce a news talk show called The Leslie Marshall Show. It covers news, politics, current events, sometimes societal events. We usually are more left of center most of the time. So progressive, liberal, whatever term people like to use, democratic. That's usually the bent of the host, Leslie, who hosts. And then I also actually about 6 months ago started hosting an hour every Tuesday on the same show from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, which has been a real honor in addition to being Leslie's executive producer. And I've been doing that role, the producer role, for just over 10 years, actually, with Leslie herself. I started off, I graduated in 2004 from Syracuse University with a broadcast journalism degree, and I was kind of wavering on what we were talking about, Keith, whether I wanted to be in front of the microphone or in front of the camera or do the production. And a lot of the work that I did in school was in front of the camera for both television and radio. And for those of us in the broadcasting industry who have worked to try to get a job in the industry, you know how competitive it is. I did end up getting a job offer to do TV news reporting. I'm in Buffalo, my hometown, and that's where I was at the time. And they offered me, just to give people an idea, people who think you make all this money being in front of the camera. Now, this was about 12 years ago, but to be a TV news reporter, I got offered a salary of, I think, $19,000. And even if you add, inflation to that, look that up and try to figure out how you would live on that for 1 year. And I almost considered, or I considered taking. I almost ended up doing it, but it just was. I didn't have the financial means to, have the money to bring over there with me and kind of get on my feet. But things ended up working out. I started doing sports radio production and then some on-air work in my hometown here in Buffalo. And then I got a break about a year after that when Leslie came back into radio. She had been syndicated in the early 90s by ABC radio networks, and she was out of radio for a little while, got back in. I started working for her as her assistant producer. About a year after that, I got promoted to executive producer, and then shortly after that, she became nationally syndicated again. And for those who aren't familiar with the lingo, nationally syndicated versus local just is that when you're local, you're heard in your local market for radio or television. When you're a nationally syndicated show, you can have anywhere from a handful of affiliates to hundreds of affiliates. So we've built our affiliate network over the past decade, and I've gained a lot of useful experience, and I really enjoy doing it. And a lot of people too will ask, what does a producer do? Essentially everything that you don't see behind the scenes, and Keith, you are a one-man band of sorts. You're booking your guests. Keith does it all. For those of you who don't know, he has to be the producer, the host, the writer, everything. The editor. So it's a lot of work, and that's really what we do. I help direct the content of the show. So what are we going to talk about that day? Ideas of who we're going to have on the show. Work on things like incorporating music and interesting sound of newsmakers into the show. And probably the most fun, I would say, part of my job is finding things that I think other people will be interested in hearing and talking about, and then kind of taking those ideas from the very start and seeing them through and have success and generate a lot of interest and also help people learn from those topics. So that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell, if that helps at all.
No, absolutely. And if it's a possibility, I would love to be a guest on your talk show.
You actually, we had talked off air. Keith, unfortunately, Keith is going to be on, but unfortunately, we had to reschedule because one of the things that Leslie does, for those who Google Leslie Marshall, you'll see not only is she on radio, but she's also on television. She's one of the few liberals who goes on Fox News Channel in the lion's den, if you will, and debates the likes of Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. And one of the negatives of that is, on the radio side, she may get called at the last minute to be on television, and we have to kind of shuffle our guests and things like that. So I know for certain we are going to be having Keith on the show as a guest soon. So for those of you who watch this show here, you'll be able to hear him on there, and we'll also have a podcast that people can download or stream right on their computer or tablet as well.
Well, I'm always up for going to the city and being interviewed in person. I wouldn't pass that up for an instant.
Where are you located, Keith?
You ever been to Woodbury Commons?
No, I haven't actually. I'm in, like I said, I'm in Buffalo, New York. It's kind of a funny situation. My boss, Leslie, broadcasts out of Pasadena, and for those of you who are wondering how that works, it's the beauty of technology. The same way that I'm talking to Keith right now via Skype, I started producing the show right here, and that's where Leslie was hosting. She ended up moving out to Pasadena, but we were able to continue doing the show just because in this day of an age with technology, the producer doesn't have to be in the same location as the host. So that's kind of where we're at now. But it is nice to be able to interview people regardless of where they are now. We've interviewed plenty of people internationally as well in London. We even had one of the most riveting interviews that we've had on the show was a lot of you who are familiar with the terrible civil war going on in Syria. We had interviewed people live from Syria using Skype actually, and it was really hard-hitting stuff. I mean, they were literally risking their lives by actually giving the interview, so we gave them aliases to use on air and things like that. And so it's really amazing what you can do with technology now and all the doors that it's opened as far as having access. And like you said at the beginning of your show, something that I think a lot of people here take for granted is freedom of speech. People risk their lives in other parts of the world just to do what we're doing, and we, just take a second nature, some of us.
No, absolutely. And you bring up a lot of good subjects I want to run past. Is the first one is I interviewed everyone. Well, first off, Woodbury Commons, you're about, let's see, my friend went to Buffalo. Well, both of them. I used to work over in a retail store. Then went to college there. That was about 2004, 2005. I haven't talked to them in a long time. That was Roxy. She was cute. I liked her. I had a crush on her. And on Mike, they went on to Buffalo, and I think they said there was about 6 to 8 hours.
Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. In New York, you can get places pretty easily. Using the Route 90, the throughway. Or as funny as people, and I had to like think about saying that because people in Western New York in this area call it the 90, and it's just like one of those things. And you say it to people who are from out of town, and they look at you like, "Wait, what are you talking about?"
As long as no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So you're talking about, is that it's kind of near Central Valley?
Yes, near
Okay.
West Point.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. I haven't been out that way, but yeah, it's not too far. I've traveled throughout, zigzagged all around the state throughout my life. Being from here and then going away to college, not that far, but to Syracuse. So I, traveled that 2.5 hour drive many a time when I was going back and forth to school, and I still get up there for different alma mater events and things like that. Fortunately.
I never got a chance to go to college. Long story about that is, yeah, I have an IEP diploma, and people who want to know what an IEP is, it's Individual Educational Program. Basically, it's if you took special ed classes, you took the classes you're supposed to be taking, and I was basically pushed along in the high school. I didn't learn a damn thing. I spent more time reading the newspaper, and that's
Really?
well, it's horrible.
That's
But
terrible.
I remember my two brothers. Well, I'm the youngest out of four. I'm the youngest out of four brothers and one sister. Um, I visited Plattsburgh. I visited Delhi. My brother was nice enough to let me sleep over at his dorm. So I couldn't attend college because I'm not educated enough to go to college. But I wanted to get the college experience. So I just wanted to spend a night or two at a college to be like, okay, I know I'm not good enough to go to college, but my brother was nice enough to let me get the experience of being in a college setting, even if it was for a day or so. So, I stayed out of college for a day or so. It was nice. I wish I was given the opportunity, but basically, if you have an IEP diploma, it's basically saying you can learn how to work on refrigerators, cars, learn a trade, go to a 2-year school on OC or Orange and Rockwood, or go to Rockwood. I know there's two different things. And for people out there, Orange and Rockwood is a company, power company. And it's just, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work on cars. I didn't want to work on air conditioning. Maybe later in life. But, I don't know, when I was in high school, the one movie that influenced my life, had a big impact, was Almost Famous.
That's a good movie. I love that movie.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, what a great story, just of music in general to have that, with Rolling Stone, like that time. I think that would have been one of the most amazing times to live in for music alone. I'm a big classic rock fan, and just to look at the different, I agree with you. That movie was done so well, and even outside of the individual characters, which were great, and the story, the kind of the love story they show, but also just, the whole groupies that follow bands and everything, and how dedicated they are, and they follow them from city to city. It kind of gives you a behind the scenes, behind the music look, if you will. So, what a great movie. That's a good movie to be a fan of, absolutely.
And there's the one thing that influenced me was I wanted to be a personal assistant. I wanted to go on Roar. I would like to be on Monday Night Roar, but I would, if you're a wrestling fan, are you a wrestling fan?
I'm bad. When I was younger, I loved wrestling. I mean, to give my age a little bit. When I was young, the younger or enough to really like just start getting into wrestling. It's when like Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant were like in their heyday. So those were like, I don't even know if you know some of these names. Superfly, Jimmy Snuka, I remember. I'm trying to think. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I actually remember more than I thought I would. But I really followed him a lot when I was younger. But then it's amazing to see actually what has come of pro wrestling and how big it's exploded, with the amount of fans that it has now. It's really a force to be reckoned with. And it's funny, I'm on Twitter for both work and for just personal things of interest I like to follow. And I always see, like, when Raw is trending, I'm like, oh, they must have had another event, And actually one of the most fun events when I was younger is my mom, who unfortunately passed when I was 17 of cancer. One of the best memories I have or I shouldn't even say, there's so many good memories, but one of the memories I have anyway about wrestling was she actually took me to an event that like had come to Buffalo, and they had like, who's it, Macho Man, Randy Savage, I mean Hulk Hogan, everybody who I loved at the time was there, and it was like, like a mother taking her son to this thing, and God knows I never talked to her about it, but she probably had like zero interest in it, but totally fooled me as a kid. So I thought she loved it as much as I did. And, like, talk about the sign of like a good parent, But yeah, I just remember having like a blast. So that's, I think, a really fun thing for all sorts of fans to get involved in. And now you see also the kind of like the way that they've really developed characters, and so many people play the role of villain, or you even see now it's like the villain that you love, you know what I mean? So it's they definitely do a good job with it, I think. Absolutely.
No, I agree with you. So I would love to go on tour. Going back to Almost Famous at the time, I wanted to be a roadie, go on tour as a band like Rush, Iron Maiden, Kiss.
Oh yeah.
And eventually that transitioned over to wrestling. Go on the road with the Divas, Trish Stratus, Lita, Kansas, and I was like, well, how else can I get that? And eventually that idea fell through. And how my talk show came up, if you're interested in knowing.
Yeah, I know.
The whole point of how my talk show came up, it's stupid, but it comes full circle. Basically, it all started with a birthday wish. When I turned 21, people said, you're 21, it's the most special birthday you can have in a lifetime. You should do something special. I was like, well, I'm like CM Punk. I don't drink, I don't smoke.
Good for you.
And thank you. And I was like, well, I want to do something special. Well, if I have to die, I would like to have a couple famous friends. But I was being told off, and I was being told to go fuck myself.
Oh, that's terrible.
I was told to piss off, you're a lowlife, you don't have time to deal with people like you. And I was like, okay, well, I did have a talk show in high school. How can I make that transition? Well, I don't shut up, and now I like talking a lot. So I'm now using that as an incentive. And now I created my own talk show. And now I have some good famous friends. Like my good friend Kerrigan Mayhem from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, that's another blast from the past. My brother was, like, so into that. So I, by association, learned a lot about that show, back. And that was when it, like, first started. And now it's, like, coming back again. So that's really interesting.
If you want to see a great interview, look up Kerrigan Mayhem. If you want, I can send it to you. That's a really
that'd be great. Absolutely.
I also got the chance, and for people who want to know what Kerrigan Mayhem is, he was Godar. I also got the chance to interview Barbara Goodson. She was Rita Raposa. And unfortunately, that was a demo interview. Basically, when I started my talk show, don't ask me why, and I say this for all of it, Don't ask me why. Seemed like a good idea at the time. But I suffer from depression and I have panic attacks and along with other problems. So I was like, okay, doing a talk show, let's only do phone interviews. So I got people from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Kerrigan, Barbara Goodson, the guy who did War Z, Miss Appleby, uh, let's see, Sarah Valentine, she did Mary Jane for Spider-Man. I wanted JJ, but I don't know where he disappeared to. And people said this, man, it gets to me. It really does. Like, you have this great format. Why aren't you as big or wank, bigger than you portray yourself to be? Why don't you have sponsors? Why don't you have people helping you? I'm doing the best I can with a learning disability. Would you help? Would you like to help me? No, if you can't do it yourself and it's not meant to be, it's always like, yeah, thanks a lot, asshole.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to him. But,
No, but I know what you mean. It's like your internal thinking, especially if someone's saying, like, why isn't this happening or why isn't that happening? And then, you're like, okay, well, would you be interested in, helping me, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, well, then were you really sincere in asking me that or not,
Like I said, it's uncensored. You can say anything you want.
No, absolutely. It's funny actually that you mentioned that. That was one of the things that was difficult for me. On radio, obviously you can't because of the FCC, and being a producer for so long, you could say whatever you want behind the scenes, even though you're always supposed to be careful, which usually I am. But going on air, I've never slipped, thankfully, knock on wood, but that was one of my biggest fears, was because most of the time when I'm talking about something, like, I never really had to censor myself, but obviously you have to be careful on air, so you kind of measure the way that you speak, and I think it helps too, because you'll notice too, you and I both have the gift of gab, as I think some call it, where, we can just talk a mile a minute, and when you communicate that well, that quickly, it's hard to sometimes, like, put a filter on it, you know what I mean? So thankfully, I haven't slipped up, but that's something, especially when you're talking about something that you're passionate about, or on the flip side, something that you're passionate about that upsets you. That's when I think it's the most difficult, but it's something that you kind of have to rein in, if you will. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And after the show, I do have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, not at all. No problem.
Now let's have some fun with this. I'm going to pass the show over to you. Push as hard as you want. Ask any personal questions you want.
All right.
But the one thing I do want to ask you is,
sure.
You mentioned you have to censor yourself,
mm-hmm.
and maybe you can teach me how to do that, because I don't have no filter. I'm like CM Punk. Like I said, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I walk to the beat of my own drum. I have no filter, and sometimes that's good and that's bad. But
the only thing I would say to you is, like, if you're looking to get some sponsors, like, actually this is something you might be interested in, Keith. I was just reading, there's this YouTube, this guy who has, like, a really big following on YouTube named Philip DeFranco. He's actually really good. You should look him up. He does kind of like a modern take on news, where he just talks about what he's interested in. And he just posted a video my friend sent to me the other day about how YouTube changed its service about what you can say, and basically anything that they deem controversial, not just swearing, but any controversial topics, they take away your ability to monetize your videos, which, for obvious reasons, many people on YouTube do make all their money by monetizing their videos. So, he was saying how this was, like, a really disturbing trend, and for something like YouTube that you would think, you could say whatever you want as long as it says in the warning, like, graphic language or whatever, or sensitive material, and then let your advertisers decide whether or not they still want to sponsor you. But the fact that they would just take it right off, I think, was something that was upsetting. So that, I think, is a really actually interesting topic of discussion for people. But that would be my only advice to you, is if you are looking to monetize the show by trying to get advertisers. Not that some advertisers won't advertise with, if people swear or whatever, but that's the only thing, is, like, I would look if it's really, like, pays off. If not, the other thing you could do, which is funny, is, like, I'm a big fan, not as much now, but especially when Jon Stewart was with The Daily Show, when they would purposefully bleep out like when he swore, and I thought that was even funnier because you knew what he was saying. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, that requires some more work with editing, and like it really depends if you want to spend the time doing it or not. But otherwise, trust me, I have no, I have no problem swearing at all. You know, the only thing I've found is because of going on air more, and also my home life, I have to be more careful because I have a little girl who's about to turn 2 years old, and now she's starting to repeat a lot of what we say. So I'm like really careful about it now. But no, I totally feel you there. But to go back to what you were saying about asking you a question, you know, I there's actually, it's funny that you mentioned this because there was a couple of things I was interested in asking you was when you were younger and you were going through like school and everything, like how early did your parents or you know that you had a type of a disability, and what type of disability do you have? Like, what is it called, or what is it? Like, what is it?
Well, tip of the iceberg, but I did want to hint towards one thing. We
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
talk to about it after. It's what funny incidents happened on your show and the Lee Marshall show, but we can get to that after.
No, absolutely.
To answer your question, I was about 4 years old, and I was about 3 or 4, and basically I have ADD, ADHD. I suffer from depression. I suffer from severe panic attacks. I learn at a slower pace, and I'll give you a perfect example about that. You have this book, and I say, okay, well, this book we're gonna read about three pages, and you say, okay, no problem, I can do that, I can remember it. But for me, it's gotta go over my head. You actually have to take the time and read the page like 5 or 6 times so it sinks in. So I'm basically like you, only I learn at a slower pace.
Okay, so that makes sense. And it's interesting. I hear ADD and ADHD talked about a lot more. So I think in the past, I think some people, it was just like either misdiagnosed or people didn't have it diagnosed till like later in life. And I know there's a lot of different levels of severity. You know, some people have higher levels of it. Speaking of depression, I've suffered from depression myself. And I actually just, the show I did last week, talked about mental health in the United States and the stigma and shame that is. I give you so much credit for just openly talking about it, because so many people are afraid of talking about it because they act as if they've done something wrong, or like there's something wrong with them because they have it, where it's like, it's not like no one went around, hey, can I get depression over here? Aisle 5. It's like, of course you wouldn't want it. You know what I mean? So I don't get why people would feel guilty about it, except that I think our society like doesn't openly talk about it, and there's a certain shame about it. I first found out about mine after my mom passed away, and I went to counseling because I was feeling obviously really depressed. But they found that when I was going through counseling and everything, that I had other markers of depression that were internal, that had nothing to do with the circumstances in my life. And I was just more susceptible to going through the loss of my mother even worse because I already had some of those problems. So, I totally hear you on that note. And the thing is, like, once you actually go get help and you talk, just like anything else, like if someone breaks their arm, what do? You go to the doctor, you get it treated. And that's something that people, I think, because people don't see it, they can't see with a lot of people that, you're depressed unless you're just like always down in the dumps and someone's around you and a friend like asks you, you wouldn't know. So I think that that's something that is a really good point that you bring up. And that's what I would encourage people, like anybody who's watching this and thinks that they might be suffering from depression or anxiety or whatever, just go like to 2 appointments. And I'm telling you, just the weight of off your shoulders of telling a mental health professional that you're suffering from some sort of problem, you will be surprised how much better you feel just from that to like get help with a problem. So I give you tons of credit with that. To answer your other question was about a funny event that happened with Leslie's show. Oh God, a lot of the funny stuff that has happened with the show has happened where it's like behind the scenes. And one thing that happened was, so I'll probably get in a little bit of trouble with this, but I'll give you a good one. Probably not that much trouble, but so Leslie's studio, as I was mentioning to you, is in Pasadena, and she built the studio out in her home. So, and with her producers being somewhere else, all she really needs is just like a small studio setup. So, she was hosting, and during the breaks, Leslie will be the first to tell you she loves to try to get other stuff done during the commercial breaks. So she'll have like a 4-minute commercial break a few times an hour, and then at the top of the hour, she has like 8 minutes. Well, the stuff this woman tries to get done in 8 minutes is ridiculous. So the one day she had the bright idea that she was going to take a quick shower in the 8-minute break, and my assistant producer and I are like, what do you? Before we could even say anything, she was gone from the microphone. We can't see her; we can just hear that she left the microphone. So I'm like, oh god. So of course, like the break ends, the opening music for the show is starting, and I'm just like screaming in the microphone, hoping. And she's got headphones, so her headphones are probably on her desk, and I'm hoping I'm screaming loud enough that the headphones are so loud she can hear me wherever she is. And I'm like, Leslie, the music bed's gonna run out. So I just hear, somebody rush up to the microphone. I won't do it because it'll sound bad to whoever's listening. But the sounds of a microphone getting cranked around and hit. It sounds terrible to the listener. And then she comes on the air and is about to start the hour. And she's like, I just have to be honest with you guys. She's like, I just took a shower. She's like, I'm butt naked. I'm in nothing but my towel right now. And it was funny. All these people, many men, as you can imagine, just fill up the phone lines like wanting to talk to her. And she's like, all right, I'm not doing that kind of talk show, but, and then I'll tell you, that's the mark of a good talk host is they could take something that could be a disaster and actually not only like cover it up, but turn it into something that's good radio. And that's one of the things that always stuck with me and that I laugh at. But when we were going through it, I wanted to wring her neck as a producer, So that's probably one of the best stories I could come up with.
No, absolutely. And, there's this, you probably know, a lot of people reference it to the Booker T incident.
I know the wrestler, but I don't know the incident.
Basically, he swept and he used the N-word.
Oh, jeez.
So he was cutting a promo. He was getting all hyped up. And he said, after the tag champions, I have to send you the link. It's really funny. After the ring, he's doing his whole big thing. And then it says, Hulk Hogan, we're coming for you, nigga.
Oh, God.
And he says it, and then he stops and he realizes what he said, so he grabs his face.
Oh, no.
He looks like he's about to cry.
Oh, no.
So he's all tough, and he's like, oh, shit, I think I just cost myself a job.
Oh, no.
So he turns away. Sister Sari, who passed away, was right behind him, saying it's okay. And Stevie Ray, I interviewed him about this. He's Stevie Ray's brother. He said, I thought he said it, but I wasn't really clear on it until I saw it back, and I said, what the hell was you doing? And that was a whole running gag at when Booker T was being interviewed, as remember that time. And here's another funny part. After the promo, Hulk Hogan walks up to him. He's saying, what's Hogan going to say? Because Hogan had a lot of power in WCW. Hogan said that was really funny.
Oh, he probably was so relieved after that. Oh, my gosh.
I love Booker T. He's a great guy.
Yeah, oh my God. And that's, obviously an honest mistake, and it's just like, oh man, anytime something like that happens, especially when it's being used in the slang term, versus, and that's I'll tell you, people we've had African American callers who have used the word on the show, and I would never be comfortable as a white guy using it, but they were using it in a way of talking about other people saying it. But even then, it's just one of those words that's just the history of it. It's like, oh my God, yeah. So that's the thing. Words are so powerful. I mean, that's just one example of it, but that's what I think a lot of people don't realize until they get in front of a microphone. And it's just like it's tough to be measured, but also talk quickly and be interesting and try to balance all that out. And I think the only way that you get good at it is with experience. And I think you said, if I'm not mistaken, this is your 263rd show. So obviously, you've done it quite a bit. And I'm sure if I asked you 263 shows ago, how much easier of a time you have now versus 263 shows ago, your answer would probably be different.
Well, as far as what it goes, I only used the N-word like 2 times, jokingly, And no disrespect out there. I have a lot of love and respect. And I just use the word just for fun. And, I like I said, I have no filter. I use the word retard because all my life I was called retarded. So to me, it's why the same thing with the N word. So for me, being retarded, it's synced in my head so many times. It's normal for me to use the word, and people say and get offended. It's why what? It's okay for me to use it because it's okay, and it's not okay.
I
Because
know what you mean. It depends on your audience. It depends on who you're talking to. And I think there's different words that offend people differently, but I think those are two very strong examples of words that, can really hurt people. So I learned throughout my life, to be careful about, what I say, because the thing is, like, there's so many different things you can say to get your point across without offending people. Or, I mean, you're always going to offend someone, but without offending a huge amount of people, you know what I mean? So I think, that's definitely one of the challenges of doing a talk show, as I'm sure you can attest to. Absolutely.
no, I agree with you. And for our listeners out there, freedom of speech, freedom of self-expression. Don't take anything too personally. It's just freedom of talk. But I was gonna say, remember recently on Fox News, it's funny, but it's not funny. It wasn't funny because it was a rape story. But what was funny about it was the reaction was on Fox News. I don't know if you saw it. The woman said this guy was arrested and put in jail for 2 years for 20 minutes of getting his rocks off.
Oh, Jesus. No, I had not heard
My
that. Oh,
dad
my
didn't
God.
catch it at first, and then we rewind it. It's like 20 minutes for getting his rock. It's like, yeah, Bassett got in trouble for that one.
Yeah, it's like, well, and that to me, it's like, I mean, there's crude like comedy where if I was watching like a movie or something and I knew it wasn't like a real thing that happened, but I've learned like there's just too many things in life. Like I forget there was a story where I think maybe a father of a Stanford swimmer recently. I might be botching it, but who was convicted of a rape charge ended up getting like probation or something like that, and he used the same terminology about his son, like saying something about like it was a lot to pay for him to go on the sexual offenders list, all for like 20 minutes of action or something like that. And to me, like that, talk about a time I want to swear. That's a guy I just want to slap the crap out of because it's like, really, what if it was your daughter instead of your son who had that happen? Was that how you look at it? Like, it just, to me, it's a total just lack of compassion and putting yourself in the shoes of the victim and instead thinking about yourself. And that's when I get angry, when something like that happens. I'm very big on protecting those who are the most vulnerable in the world. And I think that too often people just turn away from it, or don't take it seriously, or don't want to talk about the tough things that are in the news or that we deal with. And that's just one example of it. My big issue, and I'll shut up after this, is for anybody who's more interested in what I talk about. My number one issue is money in politics, because one of the things that I've learned over the past decade is almost no matter what issue you care about, whether it's the economy, whether it's healthcare, whether it's our climate of our planet, our warming climate, taxes, immigration, whatever it is, there's entrenched interests in keeping the status quo in Washington, D.C. because of the way our system is built on how people with a lot of money can hire lobbyists to lobby our lawmakers in order to get the results they want. And it makes it harder for the normal, average person to have sway over their elected officials. So there's ways to eliminate the flood of money in our campaign finance system, and there's ways to empower the average voter. And that's something that I talk about a lot on the show. One of the biggest ways is for the Supreme Court to overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which I'm hoping will happen in the next Supreme Court term when the ninth justice is filled. But for anybody who doesn't follow politics closely, that's a bit in the weeds for them. For anybody who wants to learn more, I talk about it from a very deep or far back perspective, drawing it out for those who aren't, following the subjects very closely, and then for those who are getting into it really intricately, so people can have the best of both worlds. But yeah, that's something that that I'm really passionate about, and it's interesting to hear something about what you're passionate about and what drives you, and that's something I love learning about. People, what drives them and what makes them, interested in, what they care about in life. So I appreciate you sharing a lot of that with me about yourself, Keith.
No, absolutely. Now, the last subject I want to ask you real fast is where do you stand on Trump and Hillary? First off, out of thousands of people, why is it down to these two morons? Because
I would. Oh, go ahead. No, you'll go, sir.
It's fun. About, just gotta say, out of thousands of people are stuck with these two morons. Hillary Clinton should be impeached and arrested. And Trump, he's just a loud mouthful. Like, I like Trump, but at the same time, now he doesn't really want the president. He's a presidency. So it's kind of like, what was the point of wasting our time?
Yeah. I mean, here, I'll show you. I actually have to have this near my desk. This is to tell you about who I supported during the primary season. This is probably backwards, but was Bernie Sanders. Because my number one issue was campaign finance reform, I thought he was the candidate with the most integrity. He, really, I think, identified with your average American who's just worried about, making ends meet, having a good life, getting a good paying job, taking care of their family. And because of that, and because of how much his platform is in the Democratic platform this year, I definitely would rather, if it was up to me, I would much rather vote for Clinton than Trump, only because if you look at beyond the personalities, and they're both very polarizing personalities. It seems like people either love or hate them. There's nobody who, like, you ask them their opinion about Hillary Clinton, they're like, I'm not sure. You ask them, like, what they think about Donald Trump, they're like, I need to hear more from him. You don't hear that. People either love or hate them, whereas if you look at what they have said they want to do, what their plans are if they're elected president of the United States, I'm much more am aligned with what Clinton wants to do because of my support for Bernie Sanders during the primary season, because of what she wants to do regarding investing in our infrastructure, fixing our crumbling roads and bridges, which will not only, help our country for the future, but also help to create new jobs in this country, good paying jobs where people will actually have a pension and a retirement. Also getting money out of politics. The Supreme Court, something that people who don't follow the election super close might not realize is there's an open Supreme Court justice seat because Antonin Scalia died, and whoever gets nominated as the ninth justice, that Supreme Court justice can affect not only beyond this 4 years, but 4 decades of what laws are going to be made in this country. So almost anything you care about, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the environment, whether if you're a big, gun hunting person, whoever the next Supreme Court justice is going to be the ninth, and it's 4-4 right now. So whichever side gets nominated, it's going to sway the balance of the court. And the justice that Secretary Clinton has said that she would like to nominate, one of the questions that they would have to answer is whether or not they would overturn what's called Citizens United. And Citizens United, for those who don't know what it is, it sounds like this, hey, who doesn't like Citizens Uniting? Well, it's one of those poorly named things like, I love rainbows and puppies, when it's really like Darth Vader behind it. You know what I mean? What it was a Supreme Court decision, if you can look it up, for yourself, but in January of 2010, that made it legal for large corporations, even ones outside of the United States, or really rich people to donate unlimited amounts of money into elections. So imagine, your average voter, you or me, say we want to donate to a candidate we really like say the candidate you wanted, they is your number one candidate, and you want to give them $20, okay? And maybe that's, a good amount for you, or even $100, let's say, which would be a lot, for a lot of people. Well, imagine trying to see how much that's worth, and then you look at a guy who can, like the Koch brothers, not Coke for those who don't know who they are, like COKE, but Koch like KOCH, the second most wealthy family in the United States behind the Walton family that owns Walmart. They donate literally billions of dollars each election cycle to sway who gets elected president, who gets elected to the Senate. So if that Supreme Court decision for Citizens United was overturned, and these corporations and people couldn't donate unlimited amounts of money, it would then make candidates care a lot more about your $20 and my $20 and other people's $100 donations. And what happens if they care more about our money? Well, they're going to care more about what we have to say and what issues we care about. So, and to me, like I said, what I've learned over the past decade is that money matters. Whether you like it or not, follow the money, and you'll follow what's happening in our election system and what's happening in our legislative system. We need to get the money that's polluting our system out of the system. And the way to do that is to overturn that Supreme Court decision. And the only way to do that is to get a ninth justice who can do it. And that's something that Secretary Clinton has promised to do and ask all of her Supreme Court nominees. So that's, again, a really deep political issue that if you don't follow it very closely, people might not know about, but it's massively important. And it's one of the things that Bernie Sanders, if you listen to his campaign, he talked about it over and over. And it's what gives people who are on top, the top 0.1% massive amounts of power. They already have a bunch of money. Now they have a bunch of political power, and it makes it harder for people like you and me to actually be heard. The other reason is, and frankly, I'm a little surprised that you like Trump, because of, if you look at, like what you said, when people who have talked negatively about people with disabilities,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw what he said about that New York Times reporter who is disabled, and he
Yeah, I
mocked
saw that.
him. Like, that really just broke my heart when I saw that. And, I understand that there's certain appealing things about a candidate who has a lot of bravado and, talks tough and, doesn't sound like other politicians because they'll just shoot from the hip and say whatever comes to mind. There's like a certain attractive quality to that. But that's something I'd rather see if I was watching a reality show, not the leader of the free world. I just think if he got in office, I mean, it's like whatever job you have. If you go in and you hand them your resume, why are you qualified for this job? I have no idea what the hell that guy would say. Well, I've went bankrupt. My businesses have went bankrupt 4 different times throughout my career. I won't disclose my taxes. I don't know. That's another people don't know. Every single candidate in modern political history since Richard Nixon has turned over their tax returns. Donald Trump, Google it, people, has not turned over his tax returns. So to me, that's really bad, because it tells us exactly, his big thing is, I'm so rich, look at all this great work I've done with my companies, but the only proof we would have of hard numbers would be his tax returns, and he won't disclose them. So that's really troublesome to me. I mean, the guy reminds me of a snake oil salesman. For those who are turned off by Secretary Clinton, I think a lot of it, honestly, is if you look at what's reported about her and you look at what is fact. I mean, this whole thing about people talking about her emails and everything like that. I mean, if you look at what actually happened, like when people say, "Oh, the emails," they say, "Well, what do you mean? What about the emails?" And they say, "Well, she used a private email server instead of a state-run email server." But the thing, like, most people don't know is, again, Google it. Don't take it from me. Look it up. Find a good source. That was not against the rules of the State Department. They said you can use your state-run email or you can use a personal email, and on your phone, which most people send their emails on now, you couldn't use a state-run email address. If you think about it, it was back in 2008 to 2012. Technology wasn't where it was now. Now, was it a dumb decision? Yeah, I mean, which she said it was. But to say that somehow brings her to a level of this guy is like, I don't know what planet some people are living on. I think she really cares about people. I think she cares about, I mean, if you look at what she did as first lady, her whole goal, which she got the hell beat out of her, was to try to get health care to people who didn't have it. And people didn't like that a woman wasn't just like picking out the china in the White House, and we're actually trying to like get something done for people who needed health care. So I honestly think some of the criticism that she's received is deserved, but part of it is because she's been in the public eye for so long. And anytime you're in politics for more than a couple of years, you're going to get the hell kicked out of you, especially when you're Clinton. But I think she's really well prepared for the job. She has the right blend of experience, and also I think empathy, which I think is really important because both of these people have more money than I think you and I would ever imagine. And you have to look at someone who actually is going to have some sort of empathy for the average person in this country. And I just don't see Donald Trump having any empathy whatsoever for anyone who makes like under $5 million, which is like the most people in this country. So that's why I could never support the man. I just think that he's heartless, and I think to be the leader of not just parts of the nation but the whole nation, which America is such a melting pot, I think you have to be able to think about and care about all different sorts of people in this country, and I just think he couldn't be further from the truth. But I do agree with you. I wish that there was. I also wish our system had more candidates to offer in the general election. This point of the general election. I know that there's a libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson, and the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, but realistically, neither of them is going to even get enough of votes to even show up on the debate stage, which is only like 15%. So my hope is that, someday soon we'll have more than two people to choose from at the end of the presidential election, because I think a lot of people would benefit from that, because it is kind of crazy if you think about we have hundreds of millions of people in this country, and at the very end of it, we only get to pick from two. I definitely feel as far as that goes.
No, absolutely. And to be honest, I like Ben Carson. It's that far people make fun of him because he talked in third person.
Yeah, he was kind of funny. He came across as kind of like a thoughtful person, but then it was like weird when he came out with some of his policy positions. Like he said that really crazy stuff about the grain pyramids and stuff. I don't know. He said some wacky stuff in the primaries. Like I remember reading some of it. It was kind of like comedic, and then he got in trouble for what the hell did he say? I don't even remember. He was leading Trump for a while, I remember, in the Republican primary, and then it was like right when he was in the spotlight, he seemed to wither at the worst possible time for his campaign anyway. But no, there was a big Republican field. I mean, 17 candidates at the start. Like, that was massive. It's kind of crazy to think about after all that they ended up with Trump. I don't align a lot with a lot of the policies in the Republican Party. I think a lot of the time they focus too much on the ultra rich and not enough on your average American. They don't seem to have policies directed at anybody who makes under $250,000 a year, which is the massive number of people in this country. That said, if I was to vote for one of the candidates in the Republican primary, I probably would have voted for John Kasich. I think he had the best amount of experience being governor of Ohio. He actually seemed empathetic, and like he actually, even if he disagreed with someone politically, he would listen to them and hear them out. And I think that, the Republican Party probably would be in a much better position if they had selected someone like him instead of like a demagogue, a xenophobe like Donald Trump.
Keith Andrew agrees.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you.
Now, wrapping up, I took this one from the Factor, so all rights go to Bill. It's going on the record. When I first approached you for my talk show, what was your honest opinion? And after being a guest on my talk show and everything we talked about, how do you feel about it now?
I was, at first, honestly, if I can be honest, I was like a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure what to expect. And I think anytime you're going to be on air and you're just not sure what to expect, part of you, is you feel a little bit of nerves. But that's one of the things that I think you get more calm about as you do more. That said, I really had a lot of fun doing it. Like, it's been really fun talking with you. And I think you're really good at creating conversation and making someone feel comfortable. And I think that's so important when you're interviewing someone, because if they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to open up.
Right.
You know what I mean? And by you bearing yourself and opening up yourself, it makes the other person want to open up. So I really, honestly think you did a really good job, and I really enjoyed being on the show. So I have a good perception of the show, I would say. Absolutely, after being interviewed by you, I definitely would recommend anybody who's considering coming on the show doing it. It was a good experience.
Now, wrapping up, stay tuned for after the show. I do have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
About wrapping up, I just want to say it was a real honor and privilege to have you as a guest, and I'm looking forward to building a friendship with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith.